Okay, so hello everyone. Welcome to Plasma 2021. My name is Paige Sarlin. I'm assistant professor in the Department of Media Study at University of Buffalo. This series is sponsored by the Department of Media Study and the Office of the Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences at the University of Buffalo. This series has also been curated in collaboration with Liz Park from UB Art Galleries and Ephraim Serdar from Squeaky Wheel. We are recording this talk, so if you don't wish to have your voice or image on the recording, please keep your camera off and your microphone muted. We begin with the acknowledgement that the land on which the University at Buffalo operates is the territory of the Seneca Nation, a member of the Haudenosaunee Six Nations Confederacy. This territory is covered by the dish with one spoon, treaty of peace and friendship, a pledge to peaceably share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. It is also covered by the 1794 Treaty of Canandaigua between the United States government and the Six Nations Confederacy, which further affirmed Haudenosaunee land rights and sovereignty in the state of New York. Today, this region is still the home to the Haudenosaunee people, and we are grateful for the opportunity to live, work, and share ideas in this territory. Tonight, I'm thrilled to introduce Jenson Leonard, whose talk tonight is entitled Set Radio Realism. Jenson Leonard's practice involves the intersection of poetry, conceptual art, and internet memes. He received his MFA in creative writing from Pratt Institute in 2019. At present, he's a tech resident at Pioneer Works in Red Hook, Brooklyn, where he's been working on a film project. He also has a solo show up at CCS Bard, which he'll talk some about tonight in his talk. He was awarded an artist residency at Obracadabra in Oaxaca, Mexico, and the Marble House Project in Dorset, Vermont in 2019. He's been interviewed for an article entitled The Socialist Meme Lords Radicalizing Instagram by Motherboard and published by Vice. And also another interview with him was published in AQNB online. And that interview, I will put a link to it. It was conducted by Manuel Arturo Abreu. And the title of that piece is Why I Still Shitpost. And the students in Plasma, the course, read that for today. His writing, Leonard's writing, has appeared in The Squawk Back and Apotheosis. He was commissioned to produce a podcast about the history of memes in 2016 by Bumpers FM. He also appeared in an episode of Adult Swim in 2019 about meme culture. Most recently in Buffalo, he initiated and chaired a panel discussion entitled Race Jam, a panel on memes and online imagined Blackness at Squeaky Wheel as part of his summer residency this past year. As he told me, he spends most of his time in Philadelphia with his partner, Brittany, watching Korean dramas. But tonight he's here to talk about his work and the ways in which he uses the radical power of humor to work on, in, and around meme culture, intervening into the architecture of surveillance, predictive algorithms, and data extraction that make contemporary racial capitalism function so well. As he writes in his own artist statement, quote, not unlike the earliest forms of oral poetry, memes transmit our cultural memory. Leonard scours the web for these preserves to create a bricolage of text and image that call into question notions of identity and empire. In doing so, his art charts an internet psychogeography that questions the sensorial exhaustiveness of audiovisual capitalism. And that's all his description. In doing so, Jenson asks us to consider where and how we might interrupt and challenge the flow of words and images that shape the profoundly uneven, hostile, and racially divided conditions in which we live and think, and which many, like him, are working to change. So, give a warm, muted microphone welcome to Jenson Leonard. And you are muted.
Thanks for having me, Plasma, University of Buffalo, Akram for putting this together, Squeaky Wheel. Yeah, I definitely have virtual stage fright, which I feel like is a good counter argument against Nathaniel Jurgensen's notion of digital dualism, like online and IRL aren't so separate, because I'm nervous AF right now. But I think I'll just get into the slides and just get comfortable riffing. Thank you everyone who showed up. Yeah, so I'm just gonna share my screen. Or is my screen's already shared? No, it's not. Okay. So I'm presenting now. The title of my talk is called Set Radio Realism. Sort of just in line with what I already do, the culture jamming and the meshing of disparate stuff. Mark Fisher's capitalist realism, and the Sega video game Jet Set Radio Future. And the talk will elaborate more. Really, it's like everything I talk about today, I want to be a through line towards why I make the work I make, and some of the philosophical and conceptual underpinnings, what I'm thinking about as I meme along. But it's also very much like I want to be capacious and generous, but I'm also like, this is the tip of the iceberg. It's just the kind of, you know. So I'm gonna start. So my name is Jenson, not Corey. I'm feeling a little sluggish today. Thanks for having me. Just got into Brooklyn like on Tuesday, still getting adjusted. Have not, I'd say average time of like going to bed. Average bedtime is probably like 2:10 a.m. So I'm trying to get better going to sleep early. It's, I think tonight's gonna be good. I think tonight's gonna be like 1:30, you know? Like if I can fall asleep mid Godzilla versus Kong tonight after you know, a great lecture. So I went to Duquesne University, small Jesuit school in Pittsburgh, PA. Just kind of went because, you know, very typical thing where your parents tell you to go to college and that's the expectation, you don't question it. And when I got there, this was transitioning from a Catholic high school, private high school, Central Catholic, which was just basically a NCAA football pipeline. And then getting to Duquesne, this Catholic school in Pittsburgh, it's pretty awful. Lots of North Face fleeces and Ugg boots. But the good thing was, some of my friends from high school went there because we all got a decent, you know, papal discount. And the knowledge sharing and the camaraderie of being at such a just bleak, bland environment. Like we did the very typical stuff where you just like listen to a lot of, you know, Kind of Blue and Merriweather Post Pavilion, and you smoke a lot of weed and, you know, have mind expanding experiences, but that are definitely hinged around what you're learning, and then meeting up with your friends and being like, yo, today in class we read Sister Carrie by Theodore Dreiser. Let me tell you why it sucks. I learned what literary naturalism is today. Let me tell you why it sucks. So it was all just like a good melding of the minds and building, I'll say it in quotes, building counterculture in the midst of such sort of Duquesne waspy bankruptcy. And because classes were small, and especially so if you were doing liberal arts and a professor saw that you gave a shit, they would be extremely preferential. And they would basically just like become a mentor and confidant. And you can't get that at the big factory schools so much. So yeah, after that, well, I guess during that, my first major initially was digital media arts, and I lasted about 2 weeks because I couldn't keep up with the professor in this Photoshop class and his tiny cursor clicking things. And I was that person who was always asking questions, holding up, the flow of the class. I liked the idea of learning Photoshop, but I didn't like it in that context, so it didn't work out. And of course, like, no offense to psychology majors, but if you're a psychology major, like, you just say you don't know, you're undecided. And then I did English writing, and that was where things felt right. And it helps when your professors are, gushing over what you're doing. But there's something about creative writing and just playfully mapping out my ideas through written language that spoke to me. Graduated college, moved back in with my parents. It was tense, a lot of leftovers being eaten, and like, who ate the leftovers? And then just work life, service industry, bussing tables and working at a waffle kiosk, and just full precariat service industry life. I worked 2 jobs for 4 or 5 years. And so while I was in this, I worked at a waffle kiosk that was on the University of Pittsburgh campus, and I had a smartphone, and I was just absorbed and drawn to the sort of network of fringe creatives. They call it weird Facebook. It was like all the like queerdo Marxist communist comedians, algorithm be damned, meeting from like 2000, maybe 11 or 12 to like 2016. There was really a moment. I guess you could throw alt literature, that movement, into it, net art. But so I was just seeing all of these memes that were saying things, the topicality, the content. It was like, this meme is talking about current shit and it's making me laugh. And it's also inventive wordplay and language and poetry and conceptual art. These are, I think it's 51, 51 submissions over like maybe a 5-6 year time frame from submittable to various poetry journals, 2 acceptances. So I was like, does my trajectory career as a poet have to look like this, where I just write in captivity and then submit a poem to a journal that I think is a good home for my work, and I don't hear anything for weeks or months or years, depending on how well run that publication is. And I just knew, I'm not saying it took me 4 or 5 years of doing this to like figure out, but after a while, the attrition became too large to ignore. And I was like, this can't be it. This is not how you make it as a poet. We're going into literary theory. There's this concept called conceptualism in the wild, coined by Darren Welsher to describe writing that has arisen totally outside the purview of poetics, but has nevertheless seemed absurdly familiar to practitioners of conceptual literature, because without intending to do so, such writing appears to exploit the same kind of uncreative techniques normally deployed by the avant-garde for the literary purposes of poetry. Such conceptualism in the wild does not originate from the institutions of literature, nor does it get validated by the practitioners of literature. Instead, such writing points to a parapoetic phenomenon at the crux of meaning itself, showcasing the degree to which language finds its own aesthetic potential through disparate slippages of context, all the while evading any consolidated recuperation by the avant-garde. I think it's important to, like, that's a salient chunk of text. I think the first thing to do is point out, like, the sort of fealty towards, you know, there's an assumption there. There's a logical assumption that conceptualism happens in the ivory tower, and originality happens, and avant-gardism happens in the ivory tower, because you don't have this concept without, like, the relationship to I guess the programmatic structure of the institution. But it's also helpful when saying that, yes, these techniques that I see in quote unquote avant-garde literature are cropping up on my Instagram feed, on my Facebook feed, and the way that these strangers on the internet are creating image and text combinations and deploying weird fonts to create like a sense of synesthesia and just an awareness of how you know, fonts and color and size they modulate and have their own cadence and carry the content of the text. So just, you know, people who aren't classically trained, just shit posting, fucking around on their phone, playing around, having fun, just jouissance on their own terms, but doing high level conceptual gestures. It was mind blowing. This is the work of Lettuce Dog, an artist named Addie Borneman. She passed, next week will be a year ago in which she passed on, and she's one of my biggest influences getting involved in memes. I feel like when you talk about meme culture, you have to mention her. When you talk about net art, you have to talk about her. When you talk about conceptual art, digital artists in the 21st century, you have to mention Addie Borneman. She did this, you know, one of the grandest, highest satiricist ever, GOAT. Rest in peace, Addie. This is more of her work. This is my first meme to go viral. It's the white Power Ranger from Power Rangers. Simple caption: when you're anti-racist but still benefit from white privilege. So I think there's a lot of weight to that sentiment when, you know, there's something about being white and anti-racist that's also advantageous. Like, if you're white and you say the same shit that a black person has been saying about racism, Robin DiAngelo, it can become extremely profitable. And this meme, 2016, May 2016, I posted it on Corey in the Abyss. And then the analytics of the page, I saw it got over 100,000 views in like a week. And I realized that getting that many people to see my work over a lifetime. But it would probably take a lifetime going through traditional poetry route. So I was like 100,000 people, and then eventually I think 400,000 people saw this meme. So it disseminated that far that I was sold on the merits of virality. There's a picture of. Eventually, I ended up joining Addie in her page Lettuce Dog and creating content, and just doing an Addie impression while making work on my other page, Corey in the Abyss. It was kind of like she had 60,000 followers to my 11,000. So it was like, hey, make stuff for me and I'll share your page, I'll boost and build it up. This is one I made for Lettuce Dog. Let's get a shirt on you, sweetheart. Clothes are simply a disciplinary mechanism of the bourgeoisie, daddy. So just, funny, clever ways to expose, post-structuralism, Marxism, Foucault to as many people as possible. This was another one I made, I think 2017, like just Bill Clinton posted, still applies, like Clintonites or Bidens or Obamas or Trump's even. It's however many sides of the same, not coin, but dung. Banta Poodoo for my Star Wars heads. This is a 2017 article for Seattle Weekly called Cleverly Enough. I can't believe someone came up with this title. I've never. Seizing the memes of production. Another meme I made for Lettuce Dog, it's MLK, and just sort of like the extreme liberalization of MLK, who was like a radical socialist, and was killed by the federal government as soon as he started being more vocal about wealth inequality. Then the FBI killed him. And then this Vice article, I think it came out in 2018, the socialist meme lords radicalizing Instagram. It's important to when I historicize, the artistic trajectory, wrote this in, but it's a pretty cringe thing to say, the socialist meme lords radical, like it's too long. And Vice is like a terrible, who started Vice was fucking Gavin McInnes. And when I think of Gavin McInnes, I think of like a very particular genesis of like white hipster racism, where you can say fucked up white supremacist fascist bullshit, but hide it behind irony. Like that's the Vice brand, basically. There was a block quote from that article. I see new socialist meme page pop up every day, Jenson told me. Lots of people are getting radicalized and brought into political consciousness through memes. And the beauty of that is a real ambience of revolutionary intent is fomenting a bare minimum. It feels like inevitable dialectical moment of contestation. So I look back at this and I'm like, it's almost word salad, but it's not. It's like at the end, it gets a little word salady. But I think what I was trying to say is there's a real valence there between people online. I mean, even if you just look at the uprisings this past summer, I'd like to feel like me and a select group of creators willed the Minnesota Police Department getting burned to the ground through years and years of the repetition, the subconscious, kinetic, metaphysical repetition of suggesting that precincts should be burned down through our memes. So I don't feel like there isn't a there in terms of people online clamoring for something, a certain communist desire. And, it's difficult for it to translate materially because these questions are so big and so vast, and there's so much opposition. But I do think there is a correlation. A few of my influences include poet playwright Amiri Baraka, the graphic design studio Pen and Pixel, and the game that carries the namesake of this discussion, Set Radio. So I feel like with my practice, I get to embody all these influences at once, and do something with this whole archive of encyclopedic knowledge of growing up being a 90s kid, watching Cartoon Network, Kids WB, just, I have to do something with this pop culture knowledge other than excel at trivia night. So I might as well make like agitprop with it, And the thing I like about memes is I won't say that they are, I know in all caps here it says unmediated. And I'll make that more precise. What I post at any given time can be deleted by the platform, but as opposed to a publication where you go through editors or a physical art object where you go through gallerists and curators, there is less outside mediation. I have an idea, and the idea filters through the course of my hands, and I input it into my computer, and then it putes out onto the internet. And there's no one outside telling me to refine that or edit that or scale it back or censor it. And so as long as memes, I think, just fundamentally have that structure in place, then I think they're the most, maybe not preeminent, and maybe not honest, but asterisk. But yeah, maybe yeah. And the poetic register is there. Like Corey in the Abyss doesn't happen without a certain facility with language. And yeah, it's just it's my favorite so far meeting point of all of the things I care about, and being able to just blast them out into the world. Here's a quote from the poet playwright Amiri Baraka: "The word art is something the West has never understood. Art is supposed to be a part of a community, like scholars are supposed to be part of a community. Artists decorate people's houses, their skin, their clothes to make them expand their minds, and it's supposed to be right in the community where they can have when they want it. It's supposed to be as essential as a grocery store. That's the only way art can function naturally." So this is basically arguing that art should not be a fetish. It should not be filtered through this commodity fetishism. Art should exist, as a function to make our world better. But I would say a lot of capital A art does not do that. Shouts to people. I guess now people, I resent that I know people. I hate saying people. It's kind of fun to say. This is Ramel Z. I'm just going to play a little bit of a brief clip of Ramel Z.
Control sequences off, definition off, all cues off, run it down. Identify yourself, transit artist.
I'm Delta 2 from the underground system of New York City.
I'm
confirm the information about the artist, rapper, philosopher Rem LZ?
Of course.
I thought you'd know him. Answer these questions. Who made this art that you could only photograph in the dark?
Rem LZ.
Who looked like Voltron before Voltron?
Rem LZ.
Whose voice is this?
Trouble me here, triple me hop, up, but twiddly dee dee, one on the jump, jump, jump.
And what does one call this style?
That's the gangster dub.
Who transformed subway writing into an art form and philosophy?
Rem LZ.
He says the only way to destroy a symbol is with a symbol. So in order to destroy a symbol, you have to arm a symbol.
Who dressed like a Renaissance gangster, samurai, alien, superhero?
Rem LZ.
Who made all these gods out of garbage and these weapons out of skateboards?
Rem LZ.
Who inspired a cult in Norway? Who danced with Madonna?
Rem LZ.
Who won a bet with Jean-Michel Basquiat that he could paint Basquiat better than Basquiat?
That's the end of this conversation. All I remember was the police officer saying, no, your real name.
Rem LZ.
Oh, no. The name in your passport.
Rem LZ is an equation.
So it's not actually who, but what? Equations. I know.
Yeah. So I think that's a good, quick, primer on Ramelzi. Yeah, this is like there is a Supreme hat that Ramelzi did in like 2005 or 6 maybe. Like this is it was maybe 2008, and I was just like a hype beast, nerd, clout demon on the internet, message board, forums, and I saw this hat, and I was like, why is this hat $300? And it's like, oh yeah, because the secondary market is insane. But that's how I first knew Ramelzi, and they made this hat. Born in Far Rockaway, New York, Ramelzi began spraying graffiti on New York City subway cars as a teenager. Already enraptured by the power of the alphabet, he worked across media to investigate the currency of letters as weapons and as elements in mathematical equations. The artist adopted the name Ramelzi, which he viewed as a mathematical equation. Through graffiti, hip-hop, painting, and sculpture, Ramelzi reimagined the alphabet's historical trajectory. In a 1979 manifesto entitled Iconic Treatise on Gothic Futurism, the artist asserts that letters, when separated from their literary function, are weapons that can be harnessed to battle the oppression imposed by counterfeit linguistic systems. Though his aesthetic may appear rooted in science fiction, Ramelzi saw a fundamental link between the cryptic script of 16th century monks and his own late 20th century conception of the alphabet. So, sorry, David Rudnick, but Ramelzi already did this like 30 years ago. But it's really challenging to just devote only 5 minutes to Ramelzi. But the artist, designer, blah blah blah, Kanye confidant, Virgil Abloh. I don't like Virgil that much, but he's done some very tone deaf things that I think you only do when you're like a certain level of like rich and black and like disconnected. But one of the things I do like that he says is, in his philosophy, he views hip hop as a classical form. And so, to me, Ramelzi embodies hip hop as a classical form. Graffiti, hip hop, breakdancing, all of it. He embodied it, and there was a deep linguistic philosophy like Derrida and Basquiat without being like clout chasing Basquiat. And just personally, I got some real, I'm trying to put it out in the world in the same way that memes put out ideas in the world. But I have some extreme Basquiat fatigue. Not Basquiat the artist, but Basquiat as spectacle And like just seeing so many people just do Basquiat art and like try to be Basquiat, stop. There's more Black artists. Like Basquiat's great, but just please stop. Like, cause you think you're doing it, but you're like making gift shop art. So stop, please. This is Pen and Pixel. They're a graphic design company based in, I think, Houston. And from the 90s and 2000s, they did thousands of cover arts, album covers for rap groups, Master P, No Limit Records, Snoop Dogg, you name it. Share. And this fucking like one-off share poster. And I love just the perspective. The way that they would do these collages is they would take pictures of all of the individual elements in front of a green screen and then collage them together in Photoshop. And I think the perspective of all of these compositions is so weird and psychedelic and euphoric. This is a picture of the game case for Jet Set Radio Future. Also, yeah, this talk is based off of it. I'm gonna play the intro to Jet Set Radio Future.
Yeah, this is DJ Professor K, baby, the master of mayhem, know what I'm saying? Bring you another Tokyo Underground pirate radio broadcast from Jet Set Radio. I'm gonna bust into your head through your cute little ears and blow your mind with my sexy voice and out-of-sight sounds. Those of you prone to nosebleeds should keep those tissues handy, suckers. Tokyo is being oppressed by the Rokkaku Group, a mega enterprise headed by Rokkaku Goji. Rokkaku is using his money and influence to mess with everything, industry, society, and even our culture. And he's even got his eyes set on City Hall. Lately, Rokkaku's been shaking down the government, passing that Rokkaku law crap, even buying off the police department. This law ain't nothing but garbage. It's just some selfish little punk's way of trying to show he's a big man. Rokkaku and his gang are trying to stomp out our culture left and right. They don't give a rip about our rights. All they care about is profit. And some spineless fools have already become flunkies in their diabolical scheme. You better believe they're listening in on this broadcast. But even in all this heat, there's a group of young kids who are tearing up the streets. I'm talking about the Rudies. These kids have set up and buried Tokyo and defeated. And now they're all wrapped up in their own little territorial tug-of-wars. Hottest team at the moment is the GGs. There's Yo-Yo, a guy who'll blow your mind with silver tongue. And Gump, a real cool lady who leaves a trail of broken hearts wherever she goes. And let's not forget their leader, a self-styled genius that goes by the name of Corn. These three ain't your garden variety street punk. Know what I'm saying? Lately, Tokyo's been on one bad trip. The attack on the record store in Chuo Street, prowlers in Dogenzaka Hill, lowlifes spreading vicious rumors, the mysterious blackout on 99th Street. And who should be following them around but the Rokkaku Group's watchdog, the Rokkaku Police. With the Rokkaku Expo just around the corner, the crackdowns are only getting tighter. My heart ain't pounded like this since my first date. I was so nervous, know what I'm saying? I forgot to wear my underwear, baby. This ain't the time to be sitting around sipping afternoon tea. Game's gonna start soon, and y'all gonna be the one making the plays.
So yeah, I can't like praise Jet Set Radio Future enough. I experienced that when I was like 12 years old, and the graphic style of the game, it's called cell shading. It's supposed to emulate cartoons, the hand-drawn styling, and then just the whole premise of the game is it takes place in 2027, and this fictional Tokyo called Tokyo To, where the government is like super authoritarian and has banished art, and you just wear these rocket-propelled rollerblades and you just graffiti the shit out of Tokyo. And Quite frankly, like games like this don't get made anymore, or at least in the AAA big budget, market-driven gaming space, they don't exist. And so like being a 12-year-old and coming home from school every day, putting on my headphones and immersing myself in this world, it's such a sharp contrast from this is a block text from an article about Call of Duty. First person ideology, the cultural contradictions of Call of Duty. So just the annualization of military shooters and US imperialism simulators that are like 90% of video games nowadays. And the connection between the military and gaming community spanned decades, going all the way back to 1962 when MIT students created the first modern video game on a computer funded by the Department of Defense. These links have remained remarkably stable over time. In 1999, the US Army granted the USC $45 million to found the Institute for Creative Technologies, whose mission, in the reporter Addie Robertson's words, was to draw new entertainment tools to build military training simulations. Then on July 4th, 2002, the military released America's Army, which, according to the Deputy Director of Army Game Studio, allowed players to learn about being a soldier by taking on the role of an American soldier, participating in force-on-force operations as part of a team. So it's just the overwhelming imperialist realism of so much American media. And I feel it's most potent and concentrated in the video game space, where you can simulate in a 3D virtual space militaristic conquest. So I think given the climate of video games now, like Jet Set Radio is even more like important than it's ever been. The follicle is political, playing off the phrase the personal is political, which originates out of second wave feminist movement. I want to point out that everything under the sun, from the ovarian follicle to the dermal layer of the skin, are intimately interwoven by the project of nation building, of subjectivity production, of who gets to be legible by the nation state and who gets exempt from civil society, biopolitics in short. The internet is real, digital and material labor, rendered supermaterial, swiped, scrolled, pinched, poked, handheld on screens made of aluminate oscillate glass on devices held together by wiring and circuitry made of metals and alloys networked by transatlantic fiber optic cables, multinational servers, global satellites manufactured by the exploited laborers of the global south, coerced by legislative and militaristic overreach of the United States empire. And as evidenced by shadow bans, mass reporting, censoring of posts, comment section antagonisms by state actors, and bots appointed by state actors, ranging from doxing to death threats, the internet is a zone of immense political and ideological contestation with material, lived experience consequences. This is an excerpt from Memetics, a growth industry in U.S. military operations, published in 2005 by Michael Prosser. It was their thesis in the Marine Corps, and now they're a lieutenant colonel for the Marine Corps. Cognitive scientists, cultural anthropologists, behavior scientists, and game theory experts must be included as professional meme-wielding gunfighters on future battlefields. The U.S. must recognize the growing need for emerging disciplines in ideological warfare by weaponeering memes. The Meme Warfare Center offers sophisticated and intellectually rich capability absent in current IO, PSYOPs, and SC formations, and is specifically designed to conduct combat inside the mind of the enemy. Memes are key emerging tools to win the ideological metaphysical fight. It's noteworthy, the source of this is students within the armed services, but also the time. This was written in 2005, over a decade before kids on the internet were like, you know what, I'm a Marxist and I would like to destroy America from inside out. I would like to destroy this landmass from inside out ideologically, and let me weaponize my memes in that purpose. Like, so this is already a contested space, going back to the previous slide. Of course, from the independent, modern art was a CIA weapon. For decades in art circles, it was either a rumor or a joke, but it's now confirmed as a fact that CIA used American modern art, including Jackson Pollock, William de Kooning, Rothko, as a weapon in the Cold War in the manner of a Renaissance prince, except that it acted secretly. The CIA fostered and promoted abstract expressionism for more than 20 years, from 1950 to the 1960s. President Truman summed up the popular view when he said, "If that's art, then I'm a Hottentot. As for the artists themselves, many were ex-communist, barely acceptable in the McCarthyite era, and certainly not blah, blah, blah." Because in the propaganda war with the Soviet Union, this new artistic movement could be held up as proof of the creativity, the intellectual freedom, and the cultural power of the US. Russian art, strapped into the communist ideological straitjacket, could not compete. So I wanted to emphasize this because it's just a very concrete, historically documented example of avant-garde artistic movements being co-opted and used as ideological tools by empire, by the United States, and just to help generate a healthy incredulity and skepticism by people when they interact with art being championed by institutions and what that's tied to and connected to in this sort of sphere of ideological warfare. FBI monitored and critiqued African American writers for decades. Again, duh. It's no secret that the FBI under Hoover, who established the COINTEL program, intensely monitored and disrupted African American civil rights campaigns and militant groups in the 1950s and 60s. The Bureau's hounding of Dr. MLK Jr. is legendary, tracking his movements, wiretapping his phone, so on, as a means to discredit and undermine the civil rights movement. What may surprise and infuriate many readers now is the extent of FBI surveillance of African American literary figures, both acclaimed and obscure during Hoover's entire career with the FBI, over 50 years. During this time, the FBI had ghost readers closely examine all forms of Black American literary output, ostensibly to anticipate political unrest as agents monitored the creators. Professor William J. Maxwell in his book outlines the FBI spying on Black American authors, blah, blah, blah. Professor Maxwell reviewed and analyzed almost 14,000 pages of FBI documents on 51 writers, from Harlem Renaissance painter Claude McKay, Langston Hughes, Richard Wright, Ralph Ellison, Baldwin, Lorraine Hansberry, and many more. He explores how the FBI ghost readers came to influence the creation and reception of African American literature. There's another part in this text that says that the FBI had literary critics on its payroll to inform and skew what sort of Black art became acclaimed and or obscure. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, do you really think that this has ever stopped? Do you think it just like stopped when J. Edgar Hoover died and put, after 50 years of developing, this entire surveilling apparatus that can decide, whose work has merit and whose should be eradicated into obscurity? You think that's not a present concern happening? And then just to connect it to Mark Fisher, and then to sort of point towards and implicate memes and meme culture. This is a review of Capitalist Realism by Mark Fisher by this guy, J.D. Davis. The disavowal of belief led to Fisher's next critique of neoliberal capitalism, bureaucracy. While neoliberalism claims to be opposed to top-down authoritarian rule, we see such strict control and management through the I can't say that word right now, of bureaucracy. In a workplace filled with mission statements, aims, and objectives, performance evaluations, we find ourselves more tightly regulated by what we believe is expected of us rather than by our actual productivity. While power is claimed to be decentralized in neoliberal capitalism, we are more tightly controlled by these increasing layers of bureaucracy. So much so that we begin to work towards accurately measuring our performance rather than tangibly working and being productive. Anyone who has worked or dealt with our state or federal government will undoubtedly be well acquainted with such endless bureaucracy, where decisions are constantly deferred to someone with higher authority, usually a committee, who then defer that decision to another group. We then occupy a space of perpetual ambiguity, constantly working to please some big other who is collecting and grading the data of our performance, which become even more fraught when the division between auditor and worker dissolves in the invention of self-assessment, where we can either grade ourselves too low or give ourselves too high of a grade. Through our endless enmeshment with the bureaucratic process, we then find ourselves within what Fisher would call a business ontology, in which life is framed as a series of economic exchanges and data points to be assessed and measured rather than an inalienable right. So I guess I sourced this quote to say that, I hope in this entire lecture, I haven't been fully rose-tinted glasses gesturing towards utopia, and more just been referencing or mapping out like a spirit of intervention and subterfuge. But when we think of social media platforms and the violence that orients them, and the metrics, likes, shares, retweets, and the attention economy, how our attention has been quarantined into these apps, and that I can post a meme, but it's still betwixt this context of these invisible digital systems that are using the most current technology to shape and refine your what Pierre Bourdieu, French sociologist, would say habitus as a consumer, like how you will buy shit next, what you want to buy, what you should buy, all of that. And it's overwhelming, which is why we have to reduce our screen time, and there's increasingly, it would seem, less a consensus of shared reality, and so on and so forth. So I guess the last thing would be, through the 5 or 6 years that I've been memeing, I was approached 4 months ago by the curator Georgie Payne over at CCS Bard, finishing up her thesis, to do a show of my memes, and I'm just gonna go to the show real quick. It's called yachtmetaphor.com. It's collected works of Corey in the Abyss, and so I know I'm extremely biased as I say this, but it's pretty fucking sick. That's just, and I feel like it honors and champions all of my preoccupations with video game culture and meme culture, riffing, culture jamming into one sort of archive. So this is the loading screen. My buddy Clay Colonna helped with the web design, just, you know, more just been referencing or mapping out like a spirit of intervention and subterfuge, where we then occupy a space of perpetual ambiguity, constantly working to please some big other who is collecting and grading the data of our performance. We then defer that decision to another group. We then occupy a space of perpetual ambiguity, constantly working to please some big other who is collecting and grading the data of our performance, which become even more fraught when the decision between auditor and worker if you could see our text thread, it's so many pictures of this site at different stages. Commissioned Manuel Arturo Abreu, who also wrote the Still I Shitpost interview for AQ&B to write an essay for this text. So it's just a culmination of all the meme shit. And so it's just like a server rack in the middle of the ocean. And there's a little fucking dock, pun intended. And it has annotations of all the memes. And when you hover over them, they're mapped. And it's like everything I was thinking, the theory I'm referencing, the cultural references, and connecting it to a wider corpus of ideas and thinkers. Because this whole thing is social. It's the sociality of the poetic poetry. You know, you don't do this in a vacuum. And then you can click on the image to enlarge it. And I'm only going to be on the site for this long because it's important to me that everyone goes to yachtmetaphor.com and just engage on desktop or mobile, but desktop is preferable. And yeah, that's it. That's my talk.
Great, thank you. I put a lot of the links in the chat already. So let's questions. If people want to unmute yourself and raise your hands and take questions, we'll put some in the chat too. Cortland will moderate that, but thank you so much. And I'm sure there are tons of different questions, lots of references people might want to follow up on, but different questions about your work, things you said. So students, encourage students, but also everyone to unmute yourself and ask a question or put it in chat. You are now muted, Jenson.
I was making a joke. I said, to answer your question, actually, yeah, because no one said anything.
Well, I had asked you one question just about the one of the main points that you talked about in the interview was about humor and the kind of radical potential of humor. And so, or how you see humor with respect to memes. So I wondered if you wanted to talk some more about that.
Yes.
A number of students wanted to ask you about where you see that and how also what happens when people don't get it or it misfires or what that does in your work, how you think about that.
Yeah. Well, in terms of misfiring or people not getting it, I don't get stuck on that too much. I sort of approach it as like, there's a degree of encryption to what I do. If you get it, cool. But I'm also like, by putting it out and making it public, I'm inviting you to get it. In terms of humor, I definitely don't want to overthink humor. I think if you do that, you stop being funny. I'm not like a stand-up comic. I do write jokes. There is a punchline element to what I do. But I think humor as just a tool is, there's different types of humor. There's, or laughter rather. There's different types of laughter. There's the volitional laughter, which is, how's everyone doing tonight? I haven't said anything funny, but I'm just laughing so that people smile. And then there's the spontaneous laughter, which is the authentic, unguarded, culturally universal laughter, which is that like universal human concession towards relatability, we'll say, or relation. But that's where I think it happens. It being the magic of whatever I'm trying to do. Yeah.
Casey, do you feel like unmuting yourself and asking a question?
Sure. So I'm referring to some of the readings that we did in your interviews when I asked this question, but I just wondered, since there are so many ways in which our pop culture draws our attention away from the core problems within our society, do you think memes play a role in guiding this phenomenon as well? I understand that they can be a quick, impactful way to bring a point to the subconscious attention of the viewer, but do you think that in a way could also play a role in desensitizing individuals for these problems, like for talking about these problems in a concise manner? Kind of talking about oversimplifying.
Absolutely. I think not only oversimplifying, but trivializing. Just look at, like, I wouldn't say it's a meme, in intention, but in the way that it just, hashtag Breonna Taylor. Just last summer, the way that these, radical clarion calls for structural change and accountability become part and parcel of, because of the platform, they become a part of driving content. And so it stops being about whatever that message is. It just becomes sort of an amorphous mass of everyone saying the same shit, but it's like, I guess, amorphous mass, i.e. like being lost in the sauce. Like there's a precision that gets lost, and that's where, like, we really need to direct ourselves. What I try to do as an individual is I try not to chase trends or topicality, vogueness, whatever, like, because to me, all of that capitulates to platform capitalism and the driving of content. What I like to do is just kind of breathe, pause, and then put something out there, but not put it out there because everyone else is doing that, because I also think there's a danger of conformity. So I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, and just to kind of ask another question, because I also wondered this based on your response. You talked about also in one of your interviews how people throw around the word woke, and based kind of like what you were talking about. And I just want to know, could you elaborate upon how you can make that term actually effective in ways that people can not just throw it around saying, hashtag Brianna, like you said, ways that they can put that to action?
Yeah, well, I think it's about being, like, intentional more than woke. Like, woke describes a certain, like, politic and positionality, but I think that needs to be defined. It doesn't, the problem with woke is that it becomes a placeholder or an umbrella term. So, like, there's potential for being lost in translation or co-opted. You see that in the past year or so, the right, or even like the left, if you want to call it that, like, woke has become a derogatory term. I just think, like, there's something to the overuse of a word that removes it, empties it of what it originally meant, its intent. So I don't think there's anything, like, wrong with being woke. Like, I have a hat that says awake, and like, you know, your third eye is open, blah, blah, blah. There's nothing wrong. Like, it's encouraged. Like, more people need to wake the fuck up. I just think like there's something to the way it's been broadcasted and said that has
Yeah,
left
some people use
itself.
it as a way to be dismissive. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been recuperated.
Thank you.
Thank you. Question on anger.
Yes, on
Anger.
anger. I'm curious.
Oh, this freaked me out for a minute because you weren't moving. You think you could elaborate a little more?
Sure. I don't think my video is really working here. Yeah, I'm just curious what you see the role of being angry in terms of issues of oppression and underrepresentation and how that is used in creative expression. Does that make a little more sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, for me, at least, I'm like angry, but it's this type of anger that like, it's like a flame that's been going so long that now there's just like smolders and you don't want to touch the smolders because you'll get burned. But like, it's, you know what I mean? There's like a levity and it's something I live with. But I also think like, you know, there's the whole trope of angry black man, angry black woman, angry black, like the whole shit is set up where you're penalized for being angry about like shit that makes sense to be angry about. So the anger has been weaponized against us and been used to like suggest or mythologize like some sort of primitive violence that's inherent to blackness. But you know, it couldn't be further. Like if you have a knife in my back, as Malcolm X said, of course I'm gonna be angry. I think the way I channel the anger is, you know, I look at Amiri Baraka and the way that he let you know he was angry, but he did it through crafting these poems that like went through the entire like genus of like modernist poetry to create like this angry, like, you know what, T.S. Eliot, I can reference you and in your language and also tell you to fuck off. And there are like methods of you know, refusal, and I think that's what a lot of black artists do. Is like we're just constantly having to like you know, I don't know why it's the case, but just like translate at the highest levels of like, you know, art American vernacular, like white systems discourse to just say like, yeah, this is fucked up, but it's fucked up because I have the proper citations to tell you it's fucked up, you know? So the way I deal with it is like, personally, I was like, I'm gonna do this meme shit and I'm gonna make memes that floor people and are so fucking undeniable, because that's about how angry I am. Like, yeah.
Thank you. That was very clarifying, or just to hear your sense on it. Yeah, because I know what you mean, at least with all the academic citations, is like supporting what's going on and how I could, I guess, miss the point.
I mean, under that Glissantian opacity is like my middle finger, I guess. Like that's and like you know, world building, hand holding, but
do you have a favorite meme that you've created?
Not a singular one, but if you go to yachtmetaphor.com and you go to the overboarding section, it's all new memes I made this year, and it's like my finest work. I was telling Manny, it was like I don't know if you've seen the movie Carlito's Way, Al Pacino. It's like about a gangster, and like he's trying to get out of the game, but he just gets called back for one more job. So these memes are like, in the event I never meme again, which I probably will, but those are the conceptual stakes of these newer works. It's the best shit I've ever made, in my opinion.
Yeah, and there's a question in the chat from Miriam that says that quotes you as saying, the more I make memes, the more I become incredulous toward calling them memes. Yeah. So the question is, if you could categorize your work under a new name other than memes, what would that be?
Memes 2.0, I guess, like sedity, highfalutin memes, like shiny memes. I'll call them memes. I mean, unless there's like a feeling in me that like objects to the name you're trying to assign, I try not to get caught up in the naming, because behind like the regime of genre is also that like taxonomic colonial fixity. And I know in certain contexts, it's good to know like what this thing is, but I don't like, do I want to go down as like meme god? Not if that means that you only think of my shit as memes. Like I'm also simultaneously trying to create wider space for what a meme is. Like, so I'm really not, call them memes, but don't be reductive about what I'm doing to the meme and through the meme.
Sam, do you want to unmute yourself?
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Question is, what are you doing as an artist to preserve the longevity and future access for your work in an age where the platforms in which it is hosted are extremely fragile and not guaranteed to exist tomorrow?
Yeah, great question. Seth Price dispersion. That's a joke that's funny to like 4 people. But to answer your question, like this is an action towards documentation and preservation of my work. So all of this shit has a more of a permanence than the fraught social media platforms. So if someone writes about my work and it becomes archived on the internet forever, that's doing that work of remembrance and preservation and archive. And this right now, that's how. And I have an external hard drive.
Other questions? It occurs to me that the website that you're shared with us and that the students will get to go through, but all of us will, is really kind of an amazing piece of work in terms of that, there was a stream where the work was distributed on Instagram. There are all these other kinds of diffuse streams, but this practice of annotating is really kind of demonstrating a lot, so many aspects of where the work, right, where your work and thinking and that whole idea of it being a conceptual practice, not just a kind of mode of representation. Do you want to talk a little bit about that annotation process?
to your comment, one of the guiding ideas was in lieu of not being like a part of Rhizome's net art anthology, I just made my fucking own. Like, but I think the annotations, like, if you want to cancel me for this or cringe, like, there's a really good, like, there's a Jerry Saltz quote where it's just like, art is, it's when you imbue thoughts in a thing. So if I can, with the annotations, at least try to map those thoughts and show that what I'm making isn't just for goo goo gaga funny haha, and that there is actually like thinking behind it. And then if the thinking connects to, as I said earlier, like the systems of knowledge production, the writers and thinkers and artists that I'm taking in so that I can respond to them through the memes, then I think you stumble on something that's like, I don't know any other annotated meme page things. So.
No, there aren't. Yeah, I haven't seen any, but I think that your practice, right, is really cries out for it. But this is also your practice, right? It's just it's pretty much a inscription of a practice that just isn't available on Instagram, right? It was all there. Now it's just can circulate and reframe and do that work of relocating it in all of these conversations, which are, like you say, much bigger than you, right? And coming through you're using them, participating in them, but they're not limited to you by any stretch, right? Which we never would say about anything that exists on Instagram, right? It's social media, but this makes that social concrete, and not just the labels or accounts names, right? And really gives people time to think, right, with you about what these quotes are that you have been pondering or thinking about. Are there questions people have?
I have a question, if that's cool. I really appreciate, totally just the sort of mashup of images, of course, but like all the different references, you got video games and 90s culture and Mark Fisher. And then, interestingly too, like, you mentioned like abstract expressionist artists, and you mentioned like conceptual poets like Christian Book. And I was thinking like, in some circles, conceptual poetics is sort of canceled, or at least some of the poets are. And so, but, I appreciate you sort of like making use of all kinds of, different techniques and all kinds of different theories and these kind of things. I think there's still use in things. Maybe sometimes we've had a knee-jerk reaction to canceling or not. And so I was sort of curious about your, is there anything off limits to you, or how do you feel about sort of the cancel culture and stuff?
Question?
What'd you say?
I said, is this a gangster Popeye question?
I was just curious to hear your thoughts on that, I guess.
Well, cancel culture, I think, has also gone through that like same recuperation, where anyone who doesn't want to face accountability just says that's cancel culture. And cancel culture came out of like Black queer femme spaces to like, hand out justice that wasn't going to be handed out otherwise. But cancel culture hits close to home. It's like, to be completely candid, like I was gonna I was gonna text Manny and tell them like the subtitle of this talk is called Gangster Popeye Erasure. But so there's people that have been like formative meme people who like got canceled. The thing about canceling is like, who am I to dismiss the veracity of the claims, or to victim blame, or really try to erase the harm that's been done. But I do think too, like the reflex to excommunicate, throw the baby out, the carceral logic, like this isn't actually a grassroots new form of justice. It's not rehabilitative at all. It's just prison. It's just like, be gone. It's interesting though that I think like, it's like who gets canceled and who doesn't, and like the sort of selective collective memory. Like Chris Brown like punched one of the most beautiful women in the world and just like still gets paid millions to like do backflips on stage. I don't understand it. So I don't know. It's like, it's a bigger problem because I don't think we've like from the top down figured out like corrective systems, like how to be actually punitive. And like, there's like a whatchamacallit, like a neo-puritanism and the cancel shit. Like, but also, there's cancellation by osmosis. So if you even say, yeah, I'm not sure that person deserves what they got, and then it's just like these conversations happen privately about someone who was canceled, and I don't like it one bit. That's the best I got.
Oh.
Yeah, I can put that. There's an interesting thing that just happened with the CUNY law school. Did you read about that? Where this president resigned, or dean resigned, kind of in order to avoid being taken up on, or sort of kind of coming to terms and actually addressing some of the things that she did. Right, where she had, there were a number of things about tenure and whatnot that she just resigned, and no one was calling for it, right? Sort of self-cancellation in order to sidestep having to actually be accountable.
Yeah, actually, while I'm thinking about it, like there's the Greek ritual of like pharmakos, where you like exile the person. But what cancel culture feels like is the spectacle, this spectacularization of pharmakos, where the person, the leper, also like publicly avails himself. And it's weird. Like, I don't like, I didn't consent to like the whole thing, like, if possible, keep it in-house, please.
Right. Are there other questions? I know that there were some questions that students raised, but we're coming to time, so we just want to give anyone a chance to unmute themselves and raise a hand.
I have an additional question that I think only our speaker can answer, and it's that, do you know if Fuss 75's doing street dining yet?
That's the best question. I don't know. I did get Fuss 75 2 weeks ago, but it was just takeout. But they did have like a little outdoor seating thing set up. So
Thank you. These are the important questions of our time.
Extremely.
Our world.
Fuck conceptual art. It's all about pho. Meat soup.
Anyone else? Yeah. Okay, well, I guess we can end there. Thank you so much. And that was great. And I'm sure that there'll be more questions coming our way. But next week, we have Ekram Serdar, who is the person who curated and runs Squeaky Wheel, and who is part of the curatorial team in terms of plasma, but definitely it's Squeaky Wheel. So come and hear him talk about his different practice and his history with working at Squeaky Wheel, but how he also conceptualizes working with artists. You were one of them. So thank you again, Jenson, and we'll see everybody next week.
Thank you once again, everyone, for having me. What a pleasure. What an opportunity, you know? Like, again, I made stuff on my phone at a waffle kiosk, and now, like, you know, I'm hopefully imparting knowledge and sharing, and people seem to give a shit. That's crazy to me.
Well, thank you. And